Welcome back to the NSP. I'm your host, Chris Ayotte. On this episode, I'm joined by Alaina Mundy, a descendant from someone who fought on the plains of Abraham. Alaina grew up in a military family and tried to do something other than the family business after high school. It was not to be. She joined the military as an admin clerk in the Air Force and loved it. Her passion for her new profession was grounded in her ability to help people every day. She eventually became an officer and continued to push the pace at work, always wanting to add value. After experiencing some issues with coordination, she reluctantly went to the hospital and was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Not wanting this to define her, she applied to be one of our Invictus Warriors and competed in Dusseldorf, where she won 2 gold medals. Before we get to our guest, a word from our partner for this episode and one of our Northern Sentinels, Farid Yaghini. As a part of the NSP's support for the Veteran Volunteerism Initiative, Farid wants to share an opportunity for veterans with Camp Aftermath.
Attention all veterans. Camp Aftermath is a Canadian registered charity supporting veterans, first responders, and frontline workers living with PTSD or experiencing mental health problems as a consequence of their duties in public safety roles. No diagnosis required. Our unique 1-year, 3-phase program offers a safe place for participants to become the best version of themselves, with a focus on volunteerism and mental health expert oversight throughout. At Camp Aftermath, our goal is clear. It's centered on providing a sense of purpose beyond uniforms and careers. We believe that the best version of ourselves lie ahead, waiting to be discovered. Recently awarded the Veteran Volunteerism Initiative grant by True Patriot Love Foundation, we're excited to be part of a study examining the positive effects of volunteerism on veterans' well-being. And we're currently seeking 30 veterans to join us in our upcoming cohorts, with a special women's veteran cohort starting this summer. We're having an exclusive info webinar for our women's cohort on 18 August, during which you can gain insight from other women veterans that have gone through our program. To learn more about our upcoming cohorts and events, visit us on our social media platforms at Camp Aftermath or contact us at info@aftermathassociation.org. Join us on the journey to healing at Camp Aftermath.
And now, my conversation with Alaina Mundy. Alaina.
Good morning.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming by the house. Great to see you again.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, absolutely. we were just talking before hitting record here about how I think both our households, there's no cards, there's nothing like that. It's kind of another day that may or may not get mentioned.
Yeah, I think after some time with your spouse, it's another day. You try and celebrate a bit, but you don't necessarily want to get too commercial about it.
Yeah.
So my husband and I got engaged on Valentine's Day in Petawawa at Kelsey's.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm not joking. So, we celebrate a bit, but we don't make a big to-do of it.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's actually our half-year anniversary.
Ooh.
Because our anniversary is on the 14th of August. So that's...
So much fun. Were you married on the 14th of August?
We were. We were married on the 14th of August.
We have the same anniversary.
Do we really?
When were you married?
2001.
Okay, 2004. So much fun.
So you got engaged like on purpose? Was it 6 months sort of offset from?
Yeah,
that was deliberate?
It was kind of deliberate. We got engaged and then we waited a full year. We waited the full year and a half because I was still in training. I was pretty young.
Yeah.
So I was just QL3 qualified.
Right.
And posted my first unit. So Brian and I decided to wait a full year because we needed to know that I was coming back to Petawawa because that hadn't even been decided when he asked me to marry him.
Right. I got to respect the deliberate planning like that because it was probably 15 years into marriage where one of us went, do you realize that Valentine's Day is like the half year point?
Yeah, it was done on purpose.
It's like, oh.
I love that. I love knowing, we have the same anniversary. That's so much fun.
That's too funny.
Yeah. Cool.
And we're off and running. Look at that. Yeah. Family.
Yeah.
I mean, when we start off maybe with your mom, like, where's your mom's family from? Where'd she grow up? What's that family background?
I'm very proud to be a third generation Army brat. And that comes from both sides of my family. So my mom's dad was an Air Force radio tower technician. And they were in Goose Bay and in Quebec City. And my mom was actually born in Zweibrücken, France. So my grandfather was a radio tower technician overseas in Europe. And the stories that I remember from my granddad and my grandmother are them living in a trailer. So like a silver Airstream trailer in France. And they had a little community, and all the wives, like all the families had these trailers. And my grandmother had just finished nursing school when they left Canada, because back then you couldn't be married and be a nurse.
Really?
Right. So, because she was in nursing school.
Right.
So right after nursing school, she and my granddad went to Europe. So they took the boat over, and then shortly thereafter, my grandmother was pregnant with my mom, who would have been the firstborn, and my great-grandmother, who I was able to know and love for most of my life, traveled to go meet the baby. And so one of my favorite photos of my family is my grandmother and my great-grandmother standing at the base of the Eiffel Tower, because you can see the construction, you can see the iron and the rivets. And between them, they're holding a bassinet.
Oh.
And I know inside that bassinet is my mother. And, the picture doesn't have the whole Eiffel Tower. It's not, it's really focused on the humans. And I know my granddad took it. And that's huge. So my mom has 2 siblings, both younger, and they grew up on Air Force bases after coming back to Canada.
And were they at a bunch of remote stations with his trade?
Yeah, Goose Bay was one of them. I remember her talking about lovingly, like kind of remembering that. But they were, like I said, they were posted to Quebec City, and that's where my mom and dad met.
Okay. How long were your mom in France for after she was born?
I don't think it was very long. It was just my mother who was born in France, and then a few years later, my aunt and uncle came along. So I think that it could have been, around 4 years that they were there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about your dad's side of the family?
So again, my dad, also an Army brat. My grandfather, Arnold, he was part of the medical branch, part of the dental branch, actually. And they lived in Kingston and in Petawawa. My grandfather's family's from Napanee.
Okay.
Yeah, my married name is Alkenbrack. So Alkenbrack is kind of a very unique handle to have, especially in the Canadian Armed Forces.
Yeah.
They'll remember you if your last name is Alkenbrack. And so there's a lot of our family in Napanee. And so they tended to stay in Ontario, but they had a posting to Quebec City.
Is Alkenbrack German?
It isn't. It sounds German. It's actually 2 names. So it's Alken and Brack. And it's more Scottish and British joined together.
And do you know how long the family was, like when they came to Canada?
So I know that Lieutenant Ebry Alkenbrack served in the Battle of the Plains of Abraham.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I know. So I am the first woman to commission in my family. And Ebry would have, the family lines are kind of disjointed back then. But it's definitely part of our history. So he would have been one of the military members prior to my grandfather serving my granddad Alkenbrack. So, and Arnold would have talks with me. He remembers Camp Petawawa, not base Petawawa or Garrison Petawawa. He remembers Camp Petawawa. And, my dad has these amazing stories about growing up at 3636 Dundonald Drive. And the forts that they used to build in the back where the trees were. And my parents, I was born in Pembroke in the 80s. And my parents have fond memories of walking hand in hand over, planted trees in the field on the south side because they lived on Borden. And now those trees are massive. They're grown up, and they remember specifically walking hand in hand across that field over the trees.
Right.
And it's those things that really, they make memories, right?
So you have a relative that was in the Plains of Abraham, and then your parents met in Quebec City.
Yeah.
So, what was your dad was, both your parents were in military families.
Yes.
Moved around. Did they all move around a lot?
Yeah, within reason. My dad's family was quite large. There were 5 kids. So I don't think he moved around as much. But my mom's family moved around a bit, until my granddad retired from the Air Force, and then pursued both of my granddads are quite clever. And my granddad, Bignell, George, he built digesters, like paper digesters for universities and for research.
I don't know what that is, a paper digester.
It's kind of like how paper would be, like big digesters to make paper.
Okay.
And then he worked with some sort of high-pressure steam system. And he would do research at universities, and I always thought that was neat. He always had a big workshop or a big garage, and one of them was called Aurora Technical. I remember being very young and hanging out there and thinking that was really cool. Like, my granddad was this really amazing engineer, magician, and it kept him busy in his retirement. And even up until the last little bit I remember visiting with him, he still had a workshop and he still tinkered, and I loved it.
It's in the blood for some people.
Yeah, and
really is.
He was happiest in his workshop tinkering. And for my granddad, Alkenbrack Arnold, he left the forces and he actually made dentures.
Yeah.
So still stayed in the dental kind of trade and still worked on his craft.
Okay. And how did your parents meet then in Quebec City?
They were in school together.
The same, like high school?
Yeah, they were high school sweethearts. And they met and fell in love, and that's it. That was it.
That's so cool. Like, was it the high school near the base, near Valcartier, or was it?
I wish I knew. I'm making assumptions, but I'm assuming it would have been near the base. Yeah. But when we talk about their relationship, it's like there's no, they met and they fell in love, and that was it. It was done. And I really like that.
Yeah.
I really like that. I think it's cute.
I love the. Yeah, I do. I think that's amazing as well. And there's been a number of people that I've talked to who, it's kind of remarkable to me, but who met in high school and are still together to this day. And I think that's awesome for a whole bunch of reasons. Not the least of which, I think it just shows how people really. If the relationship's meaningful, then they find a way, whether through compromise, whether it's through as they mature, whatever it is, it's just a sort of lifelong journey together, and I love that.
And my mom went to school in Charlottetown to become a dental assistant, and my dad pursued the reserves, and they still were together. It's even though they went their separate way to be educated and trained, and they still came back and got married and went on to have 2 children and great lives. And I'm one of the lucky ones. My parents are alive and well and happily married. I just called them this morning on the way here.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, because I needed a bit of a pump up.
Yeah.
So I called. It's early in Alberta because they live in Edmonton right now. And, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. And of course, my mom was like, "Hey, hon." And I was like, "Hey." And so I wanted to I don't know. I wanted to anchor with them first.
Yeah.
And my dad's birthday was Monday. And so I wanted to verify with him that he got all of his presents, which I left at the house at Christmas. So I hid them. My mom knew where they were.
Right.
And I got him a 2CER T-shirt.
Oh, did you really?
And
awesome.
a 2CER flag. And I guess it's funny, when he was opening up the gift, my mom said, "Oh, I already have an engineer flag." But luckily, one of the amazing chiefs that I met at 2CR in December actually took a flag off the wall of the canteen, and it's the 2CER flag, so it's all marked.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and so when my dad opened it, he said, "Oh, I already have a 2CER flag," and then he said, "Oh, I don't have this one," and it has the call sign and everything on it. So I know that when you pull into his garage, his CER flag is right up where you can see it, and I know that the next time I go back, this flag will be over that one because it's much cooler.
For those listening, and we didn't really talk about this yet, but Alaina's father and I were in the same corps in the military. I think we actually were served together at a certain point, maybe in Edmonton. I'm not sure. So when she's talking about CER, she's talking about a combat engineer regiment, which is one of the it's really the combat element of the engineer corps, and they're in Petawawa, they're in Gagetown, they're in Edmonton and Valcartier. So just
Yeah. And
talking about those.
And really, so both my grandfathers served. My mom and my dad ended up meeting because of that service and where they were, falling in love. And, they were married. And then my dad was posted. So my dad joined the military, he'll say at 17. And I know he had reserve experience before that. And really soon into his engineering career, he went to be airborne. So he was chosen to be an airborne engineer. And my dad loved his time with the airborne. I know that there's a lot of bad things that came out of that, and some people can harbor a little bit of, not resentment, but, guilt or that kind of thing with the airborne regiment shutting down. My dad does have a little bit of that, but his time in the airborne is something he looks back on fondly. And it would have been very early in his career, so it would have been great for a soldier to be picked up that early in his career. He was paratrooper. I believe he has 178 international and domestic jumps, because I asked him about that once.
Yeah.
A jump master, and loved every minute of it. It was good.
And you were born in Petawawa?
I was born in Petawawa.
Or Pembroke?
Yeah, Pembroke General Hospital.
Sure. PGH.
PGH. And so I came along while they were posted to Petawawa. And it was kind of the end of my dad's career with the airborne. So he had spent some time with the airborne, and he was thinking about just going back to the home unit.
Right.
And he had a bad jump. He broke his leg on a jump. And my mom tells stories about my dad being in a cast and me being in one of those 1980s approved walkers that they put children in. So
With like the big
with
metal
the wheels,
springs and stuff?
no, with the wheels where you could the kid could run around.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember what they're called. It's like a roller thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had me in one of those, and my dad was in a full leg cast, and I couldn't imagine taking care of a child and taking care of a husband who's incapacitated. So
Right.
It must have been busy for her. And then shortly thereafter, we were posted to Chilliwack, where my dad became an instructor at the school. And so my sister arrived when we were in Chilliwack.
And what do you remember from your time as a kid of a military family, and especially in Chilliwack? I mean, that one's interesting to me because that's sort of my second home.
Yeah,
So
I loved it. I loved every minute. I don't remember Petawawa the first time. I remember Chilliwack. I remember the PMQ. I remember the bullpen. I remember, the cement in the bullpen with the little shed that we had. And I remember the big green space in the middle with all the children, all the families, and sprinklers. I don't know why sprinklers are very, as a kid, every yard had a sprinkler. And we just spent a lot of the summer running through water, playing in the forest, picking flowers that I don't think we should have been picking, making mud pies. And eventually my parents bought a house in Chilliwack on Roseberry Road.
okay.
Just
Nice.
behind Watson Elementary.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where we lived when I started to go to school. And so I went to Watson. I used to walk. It wasn't that far. I could have probably a kilometer. I used to walk to Watson Elementary every morning and even walk home for lunch. And that was a big deal.
Yeah. Did you spend any time at Cultus Lake?
Lots of time. And
One of my favorite places.
yeah, and Cultus it's actually a Christmas tradition. So
Okay.
when my parents were in Chilliwack for the longest time, we would visit at Christmas, and we would go up to Chilliwack to watch the end of the salmon spawn. Because you'd see these huge, massive salmon in the water, and they'd be still trying to swim upstream.
Right.
And so we'd go and oogle at that. And my dad, being a keen fisherman, he would have his sunglasses on, like the...
Like the polarized.
the polarized
Yeah.
sunglasses. So we would always, I want to see the fish. I need the polarized sunglasses. So we would get a good view of that. But we have lots of photos of us on the dock at Christmas, winter. But we certainly, it's where I learned how to swim. My dad would sign out a recce boat, like one of those inflatable recce boats. And he called them rocket fins. And we would go swimming.
Yeah. So what did you spend your time doing as a kid? Like, what were your interests in elementary school or high school?
As a small kid, it was outside. So I proudly have 80s parents. And so my mom, like my parents would lock the screen door, open it up so that we could speak with them. But my mom said, my house is clean. You guys are not allowed in here. Yeah. Like occasionally we would go and say we're hungry or we're thirsty. And my mom would put out Kool-Aid and, cheese sandwiches or something. But we were not getting into the house. That was on the weekends. We were not going to go in and mess up my mom's house. So we played outside. We had a stunning backyard with a huge garden and plenty of fruit trees. So apple, peach, cherry, grape arbor, beets in the garden. And occasionally my mom would yell out the door and be like, are you in the garden? We'd be like, no. She's like, come here. And she said, have you been eating beets? And you would have beet juice like dripping down your face. And you would say, no, Mom, no, haven't had a beet. And she'd be like, go, just get going. So that was we were definitely outside. We would chase rabbits, get scratches all over us and just scrape knees and come home. And that was great. We loved riding our bike with other kids. When we got back to Petawawa, I would have been 11 or 12.
Okay.
And still outside, lots of neighborhood kids. We lived on Conn Street, which on the Petawawa Garrison is really close to Dundonald Hall and the Troy Cinema.
Right.
And so we spent a lot of time at Free Swim. There used to be a little rec center in Dundonald Hall. I know it's the gym now, but it was like a dance hall almost.
Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to remember what it's called, but I remember the wall was painted like Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, like really? the album cover. Yeah. And so we did a lot of dances. We did a lot of rec center things.
Was it a youth social center
sort of thing? It was a youth social club in Petawawa. Okay. Ooh, now I'm going to have to go look for that. But it was at Dundonald Hall before it was renovated, before the big field houses came.
Okay.
And we hung out there a lot and just had a ton of fun. And as a teenager, so we got posted to Ottawa and kind of transitioned from elementary school to high school. And then going into grade 11, we got posted back to Petawawa. And that was very hard for a 15-year-old to handle.
Coming in grade 11, yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was very tough. It was tough on me. It was tough on my family because I probably wasn't a very nice person. Teenagers and hormones and all that kind of stuff. And I really felt like I had I had grown so close with the friends that I had here in Ottawa.
What high school were you in?
Rockland District High School.
Yeah, okay.
RDHS, it was a new high school. I just felt like I had put down roots that time. Yeah. And it was hard to leave.
That's a really tough grade to have to.
Yeah, because we had spent grade 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 here. So it was those key 4 years where you're building some solid relationship with your friends. And I hated letting go of Rockland. It was hard. Mm-hmm. But, went to Petawawa, was read the Riot Act by my dad about, not hanging out on base, not being seen with Army guys. Like, he had 2 teenage girls that he needed to take care of. And 30 days later, I met my husband. my poor dad. I mean...
If he hadn't have said anything, would it have been different?
Oh, no. Because even unspoken in my household, had one of my dad's daughters started dating an Army guy, it would have been bad no matter what. Yeah, so we weren't in Petawawa for very long. And then I met Brian at the Canucks.
Where else do you meet people?
I know across from my high school, like Panay was right across from the Canucks and what used to be there, the Bite Stop and the library and the Tim Hortons wasn't even there. It wasn't on Garrison.
I can vaguely remember that because I was a cadet on the Mattawa Plains in summer of '88. So it's a fuzzy memory, but I can sort of remember the old.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
And
then they had a smoking section that was separate. And after high school, we used to get coffee and just hang out in there. And then that's where Brian appeared. And I thought, well, okay. I was a new kid, so it was hard. Being a new kid into the group in grade 11 was so difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so did you have any sort of thoughts or vision about what you wanted to do after high school?
Yep, very clearly. I wanted to run my own business.
Okay.
Very clear. I was very clear. And so I finished high school and I went to Algonquin in Pembroke. And that, again, was a difficult summer because my dad got a late posting to one CER.
In Edmonton.
Yeah. So my family was very traditional. We ate dinner together. It was important. And I remember him announcing at the dinner table that we were posted. And I then firmly announced that I wasn't going. And that was a big shock to my parents because I don't think I had been that. I've always been an independent child, but I don't think at that point I'd ever gone against anything my parents had really said. And I was very adamant that I wasn't going. And my dad didn't understand at the time. And I explained to him that I had already applied for college in Ontario and I was accepted. So I needed to go. If I transferred to Alberta, I would be a year behind. I would have to go back to an Alberta high school, do a victory lap in order to apply to Alberta colleges. And as soon as I explained that, he was okay with it. But he was, the day the truck came to get my family and I didn't go, was a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I moved in with the neighbors and they're Newfoundlanders and they were amazing and they took care of me all summer before my apartment became ready in Pembroke and I went to school.
And how was your first year of college?
It was okay.
With the vision of being an entrepreneur and a business owner.
I really loved it. I loved college. I thought it was great. I loved my roommate. I had a great time. It was tough being away from my family and I was young. I went into college at just 18.
Yeah.
I turned 17 or 18 in August of that summer and then the program started in September. So I graduated with a 2-year diploma and I was 20. I was very young. And so by the end of my program, I knew I did not want to own my own business. And I think that's wonderful because I think that education is all about what leading you towards something or leading you towards something else. And I absolutely knew with 100% assurity, I did not want to run my own business.
What was the thing that sort of, the light that came on you went, oh, yeah, no, this isn't for me?
Financing was really hard. I had a solid business plan to run a residence for students of Algonquin College that were coming in from elsewhere because at the time, they now have a residence facility, but at the time there was nothing available. So I made a plan to take over the long-term care residence right next to the school and convert it into kind of like a dorm, but with a person who would run it. So like a dorm parent or that kind of thing. And it was a fabulous business plan. And I had people who wanted to invest money, but they also wanted to take over the whole thing because I was young, right? Yeah. I didn't have any leadership experience. And so I said, no, They wanted to put the money in, but there were big strings. And I was very aware of those big strings.
Yeah.
And I wanted nothing to do with that. I wanted to be independent. And so I packed up my little Pontiac Sunbird.
Nice.
With all of my belongings.
It's a good reference point. Pontiac Sunbird.
91 Pontiac Sunbird, LE 2-door, white with the gray two-tone, gray under. Yeah, it was good. If both headlights opened at the same time.
You went all in. Yeah.
And I drove west. I just left. I left Ontario, said bye, and I headed west. I hated to be one of those boomerang children. So I had some pretty strict rules about me boomeranging because I didn't want it to be written on my history, I suppose. I moved in with my parents I think I moved in for 60 days.
So that was what you put down for yourself, was 60
it was like
days?
No more than 60 days. And I had a job. I had another job. I had 2 jobs. And I rented a basement apartment from a reservist in Castle Downs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because my parents lived on Courcelette on the Edmonton Garrison. Mm-hmm. And then I just moved in with this fabulous reservist girl who was renting out her basement, single, and it was amazing. We got along. And then I joined the civilian workforce. And I hated every second.
Did you? What were you doing?
I worked for a company called Western Medical, which is where I first got my interest in becoming an administrator and becoming involved in health services, potentially. They did independent medical examinations for insurance companies and lawyers and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can see. So it was like doctors. We had a team of doctors, and then patients would be evaluated. And then reports would be sold back to insurance companies. It's quite lucrative. I mean, some of these reports were huge, depending on how many specialists we had a human being see. So they could see a chronic pain specialist and orthopedic specialist. And it depends. It was an interesting business, but it was a very hard industry. And I didn't enjoy it. I did the work. I was good at it. I just didn't enjoy it. And then on the side, because I was very poor, I had to work a second job. So I was working a full 9 to 5. And then in my evenings and weekends, I worked at La Senza.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Londonderry Mall.
The Londonderry Mall. Yes. Well, it could have been Kingsway Garden. It could have been Londonderry.
I did do a few shifts at Kingsway for sure.
Did you?
Yeah. So, it was La Senza was super fun. It actually rounded out my my ability to be human. So, growing up on a military base, it tends to be, I hate to use the word vanilla, but we were very, like the base at my time as a child was very vanilla. So there wasn't a lot of diversity.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So working at La Senza was amazing because I was a team lead and my entire staff was diverse. Mm-hmm. And I learned new things about each of them that I still find fun and interesting to this day. I had 2 Vietnamese staff and, I love their families. I learned how to eat dim sum. I didn't know you could eat chicken's feet. One of my favorite girls, Nadia, I would comment on her hair every day. Like, your hair is amazing. I'm so excited. And she finally took me aside and said, "You do know this is not my hair." And I said, "No, what do you mean?" And she's like, "It's a weave."
It's a weave.
And I was like, "What does that even mean?" And she had to show me and explain to me what her hair was. And I was like, "That's so cool. Like, can I get, like, how do I do?" She's like, "No, you don't do that." And she asked me one day if she could have a break, and I let her go. And I said, "Where did you go?" Like, just curious. She said, "Oh, I went tanning." And I was like, "Nadia, why did you go tanning?" Like, I don't understand. I am bright white compared to you. And she showed me, she had tan lines on her legs. And I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." It's the coolest thing ever. So I will say that being a team lead at La Senza made me a more diverse person. I had never been culturally aware. One of my Vietnamese girls, her boyfriend was in mourning, and he shaved his head and his eyebrows. And I actually pulled her aside and said, like, "Is your boyfriend okay? Like, is he sick? Do you need help? Like, what kind of support do I need to give you?" And she said, "No, he's in mourning. His grandmother died." And it was traditional in his
never heard that before.
Yeah, it was traditional in his religious background to do that. And I was worried about her.
Right.
So it was just learning how to treat humans like humans. And I think that definitely has made me a better leader. Everything that I experienced there. It was fun. I'm sure that these girls look at me, look back at our experience and say, "This one time I met this manager and she didn't know anything. She was very basic and asked us all these really fun questions." So I'm hoping that I gave them as much information about me as I took from them.
When you look back on it, though, it's an incredible foundation, right? So you had that job in the medical insurance piece, which may not have been particularly inspiring, but it sort of
foretold.
Yeah, planted the seed on that sort of medical administration side. And then this great experience at La Senza was starting to become more attuned to different people's lived experiences, and whether it be, cultures and traditions around food or what beauty means to them, all those sorts of things, really important learning.
Yeah, it was very fun. And I think it was because this medical organization had they weren't about their staff, they were about the money. And then La Senza was all about the staff. And I didn't really care about the money. So it was good for me to have that juxtaposition of each thing and to consider how it impacted me. And then it got so bad with the medical side of that Western Medical that late one night, I was so sad about having to go there the next morning. I think it was a Sunday night. I applied for the Canadian Armed Forces online. I was one of the first.
What year was that?
2002, 2001.
Okay.
Yes, I was one of the first people to recruit it online.
Oh,
So
really?
I filled out the application and hit submit. And then the next morning, my mom, she said to me, "You're lucky that I answered the phone and not your father." A recruiter called the house. And my mom took the message from me and said she was glad my dad didn't answer the phone. So I conducted recruiting.
And what did you apply to do?
Originally, I applied to become an officer, and they said I didn't make the cutoff. I said, all right. So I kind of met all the recruitment for, like, it was pretty wide open for me. So I decided to go Air Force, RMS clerk. And
Okay.
I don't regret a moment of that. I think it was fabulous.
RMS is like administrative clerk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it was brand new because admin and fin had merged at that point.
Right. Yes. Okay.
And so I would have been one of the first cohorts of RMS, so Resource Management Support Clerk. And I loved every minute of being a clerk. Every minute. I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
And what connected with you so much about being a clerk?
You were helpful. You were totally helpful.
Every day.
Every day you were helpful. And people were excited because you were helpful. And as soon as you knew how to do something, you had people that were like, oh, Alaina knows how to do that. Alaina knows how to fix that. And so it was people coming in and asking for your help, and you were actually able to help them. It was nice. It was nice to be needed.
And it's also nice to see a tangible outcome. I think that was one of the things that I struggled with later in my career is working on issues and just never seeing an outcome.
Yeah, it's the loop closing. I
Yeah,
don't see the loop
it is
closing.
a loop closing. You're
My
right.
strategy, I'm strategic, so now I'm the loop closing. And the clerk world was certainly about how well you did pub searches, okay, because I'm a pub search master.
Yeah, publications.
Yeah, and how well you understood policy and how well you could serve a client, And I think customer service is something that I had such good experience with. And I think that it's one of the things in the military that we forget that, yes, you're a clerk, yes, you're a member of the CAF, but you're still involved in customer service. Like greeting somebody, making sure they're good to go, like following up, closing the loop, being just friendly and personable. I liked being a clerk because of that.
I think the organizations in the military that don't frame it like customer service are really missing the point. And it's not that this is sort of this approach in the private sector where whether it's the customers are always right, or Amazon I know has got this hyper focus on the customer. But there needs to be a bit of that to understand what your role and your purpose is. And it doesn't mean that there's a subservience to it, but it means like, what's my superpower? How am I helping the team?
Superpower? I love how you say that. My superpower was being a rock star clerk. And if I didn't know, I would find out.
Right.
And if I still didn't know, I'd find somebody who knew, or get you a point of contact, or find a reference, or start it, right? I loved doing that. Mm-hmm. Kind of the Sherlock Holmes of an orderly room. And my first job as an untrained no-hook private was the central registry at one Canadian Field Hospital. And I thought that was the epitome of the clerk world. So I digitized their central registry, and I didn't understand why they weren't digital before I arrived. So they had no record of incoming or outgoing correspondence of the unit. I digitized that, and I knew where things went in the file system. Thought I was a rock star. I really did. It was so cool. When I look back at it, oh my God, that was the most fun. Other than being a junior officer and having troops, I think being a clerk in a field unit was super fun. Learned to drive trucks, learned to deploy the field hospital.
Yeah.
And that's really where I found out that I found out where I wanted to be.
Okay.
Yeah, it was meeting the leadership at Field Hospital and getting to know them, and then realizing, I liked being clerk. I love being clerk, but I didn't want to sign on a different line for the rest of my career. So I knew that I signed here, and I knew that someone else signed below me. That was my master corporal, and then someone else signed below that. It was my sergeant. And I was like, I don't know if I could be really happy signing just on a different line as I moved up.
Right.
So that's when I pursued OPMEs.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and it was really shocking to my chain of command because I was a private. Why was I doing OPMEs?
So the in fact, I can't even remember what all the acronyms.
Officer Professional Development something.
Officer Professional
They're not
Military
called,
Education or something?
Yeah, they're not called CAF jobs.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I was a junior officer, they were the infamous OPDOPs, the Officer Professional Development Program, and they were 5 or 6 exams?
Right.
You had to write?
It was law and then ethics.
Law and ethics and war in the military profession.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of different things you had to write. But so yeah, you did it as a private.
I did.
Yeah, there was probably I'm sure there was a raised eyebrow saying, "What are you wasting your time with these for?"
There's a little bit of ruckus from
Ruckus.
some ruckus and some. I mean, so Craig Smith, I remember I had been replacing the commanding officer's secretary because she had retired and they didn't have a replacement. So I was asked as a clerk to go be the CO's secretary because I had transcription experience from working in this medical environment, right? We did a lot of transcription tapes and secretarial experience because of that. And so Craig Smith said, you should come up to the CO's office and be the acting CO secretary, which to a private seemed like a promotion, but it probably wasn't. And I remember Craig reviewed my file and he was really the one that encouraged me to take OPMEs.
Is he the regimental sergeant major? Or?
He was actually the adjutant.
Okay.
And I remember sitting at my desk and if I lifted my head, I was looking straight into Craig's office. And his parents were clerks.
Okay.
And so he had a soft spot, I think. And I've known Craig a long time and he's followed around my career. And he just encouraged me. And I think he wrote me a note because I needed to get registered to do these. And then I came back. And I think I had a higher mark on military law than he did. And he knew right away. He was like, oh, yeah, you gotta do more.
Yeah.
So it was good.
You're right. You probably had to write a note because I can remember there was a certain point where they were at capacity for how many people they could put through.
Right. And because I was an NCM and because I was a very, very junior NCM,
right,
they weren't sure. They were just questioning everything when I went through was why is this young woman pursuing this anyways? And so my leadership had to confirm that it was for developmental opportunities.
So how did that transition go from non-commissioned to commissioned world? Like what was the tipping point for that?
I think that OPME was the tipping point.
Okay.
I actually went on a really complex exercise. So they were short medics. So they pulled clerks from the orderly room. And I remember the sergeant it was a crash site. So 2 things had crashed together and there was extraction groups and, there was ordnance and there was a lot of safety concerns. And during this exercise, I actually didn't do any of the first aid support because we were surrounded by medics. But instead, I relayed information between the 2 groups and kept everybody updated. And after we'd finished and really talked about what had happened, I remember this sergeant pulled me aside and he's like, who told you to do that? Who told you to keep the 2 groups together, like informed? And I said, no one, but it needed to happen. And he said, that's new. That's interesting. He said, you need to run with that. And I remember that moment. And then it was the encouragement from Craig Smith about the OPMEs. And then it was just the idea that I had not made the cutoff for officer candidacy. And that worried me. And I arranged to talk to the PSO and found out that it was a CFAT score. So okay. I missed the CFAT cutoff by 1 point. So
for those listening, that's the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test, which they still do to this day.
They do to this day.
Yeah. Which, I don't know how much value that still has, but I know that one of my daughter's friends is applying for the military, and she had to go and do her aptitude test, I think, before Christmas. So, yeah.
So that summer, I was posted to Gagetown with my husband. And when I got to Gagetown, I pursued a university course at the University of New Brunswick. And New Brunswick has like in Ontario, you have to apply to a central organization, and then you can apply to different universities. New Brunswick doesn't have that. So I literally walked into UNB as an adult student. I could just walk into one of their programs, which was really cool.
Nice.
So I decided to take a human resources class at UNB in the evenings, and I loved it. I loved it. As soon as I took that course, I knew I wanted to go to university. I was ready. And I aced the course. And then the PSO in Gagetown told me there's 2 streams to get into UTPNCM, which is the University Training Program for non-commissioned members. And it means a full-time sponsorship to go back to university to gain your commission. And that was something that I knew I wanted to do this. And he said, the one stream is university marks. He says, which you've proven, you can succeed at university. He said, the other stream is your CFAT score. And he said, you didn't do well at your CFAT score. So he convinced me to rewrite the CFAT, which I did with flying colors.
Right.
Which I did with after being employed. So at that point, I met both streams. And I had the famous speech of like, don't worry, you apply for UT this year, you might not get it, probably won't get it. You just apply again next year. Except that I got it and got selected. And I was, we again were posted back to Ontario. So quick posting, turnaround.
To Petawawa?
To Ottawa.
Okay.
So my husband had been accepted for his remuster from armor crewman to geomatics technician, so engineer. And he was going to Algonquin. Well, he was going to go to mapping and charting for school. Right. And so we were back in Ottawa. I was posted to a little tiny brand new organization called CEFCOM, which doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Canadian Forces Expeditionary
Force Command.
Force Command. And it was brand new. I think it was about 6 months old when I came in. And I loved it. I'm thankful that I was a brigade trained clerk. And as soon as I walked in the door, I think I had been there for no more than a few days. Jason Guinea found me. So he had a bad experience with a clerk in the J3. And as soon as he found out that I was Petawawa border raised clerk, he was like, I want you. And he brought me as the J3 ops clerk. And I loved every minute of it, supporting those guys, Jim Julian, Jason Guinea, like all these guys. And it was amazing. They were doing some great work, and they definitely needed a switched on clerk.
Yeah, they were... for those who aren't familiar with the CEFCOM construct, it was one of the organizations stood up by then Chief of the Defense Staff Rick Hillier, and this one was focused on running all overseas operations. And the 2 people who were just mentioned, Jason Guinea and Jim Julian, amongst others, were the people really running the Afghanistan operation.
Exactly.
So they were busy would be an understatement.
I don't know how they spent time with their families. And I mean, I would work late, but it always seemed like they were at their desk. I remember once putting a water bottle and Tylenol on their desk, like just to make sure they were okay. There were cots. There were certainly cots inside cubicles. Yeah. And I knew that, but they also sheltered me from a lot that I did need to do. I was their clerk and I provided the support that they needed, but they also made sure that I wasn't as run into the ground as they were. It was very productive. But I learned a lot while I was there. I learned about the secret systems that they use. I learned about tempo. I learned about hard things like McKinnon and Bose. Didn't know what that was until I worked there. I learned about, I got posted in the summer of 2006, which was not a good time in the Afghan picture. And there were some very difficult tasks that had to take place during my time with them. And I'm just lucky that I was there to help them out. It was hard.
Yeah, the McKinnon and Bose piece, definitely. That was the, I guess they're a funeral home or probably a fairly large company that did all the mortuary affairs for the casualties in Afghanistan. So yeah, that would certainly be an incredibly difficult piece to have to deal with.
Yeah, we had templates. Like I made sure we had templates for the McKinnon and Bose deployments and for the repatriation. notices and messages that would come from SUFCOM. But I think one of the hardest days was all of the repatriations had been single at that point. And then I remember coming to work and we had to repatriate 5 humans. Mm-hmm. And to take that message and have to go through it and pluralize it was tough.
Right.
Like that was a bad day. And it's just words on a page. But when you think about it, it wasn't, And I knew these guys had been there all night.
Right.
Dealing with it. And I was walking in the morning and saying, okay, what do you need from me? And, we need you to write the message.
That was probably was that fairly soon? That would have been like September 06, probably.
Yeah, it was tough. Yeah. So I knew I was doing really great work. Like, when you said you liked me, we all want to be needed. I loved working for these guys. And because my UT application was in and kind of pending, it was a great place for me to feel useful while I was waiting to hear from UTPNCM.
And then you went full-time to school somewhere?
So I got accepted in early 07 for UT.
Okay.
And I remember the guys were so good to me in that section. They had blown up my message for UTPNCM selection and stuck it on the outside of my computer or cubicle. And they had highlighted Officer Cadet Mundy. And I was like, this is so much fun. And Colonel Puddester worked right beside me. He's a former armored crewman. And I remember he called me into his office, and as well as I do, I came to attention at his cubicle because that's what corporals do in an officer-led environment. Like the working rank was captain in this organization. And I stopped to attention, and he invited me to sit. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know what to call you. And I was like, sir, I don't understand. And he said, well, Corporal Mundy's fine, but soon it's going to be Officer Cadet Mundy, and that's too much to say. And I said, okay. He's like, and I can't call you Mrs. Mundy because that sounds weird. I said, all right. He goes, do you have a first name? I was like, it's Alaina. And he's like, okay, I'll call you Alaina. And then he's like, that'll be all. Like, so I was like, okay, thanks, sir. Bye.
Okay. Glad we got that figured out.
Thanks. But it was just a really cute conversation. Like he was genuinely like, never, I haven't been around a cadet in a really long time. I have no idea what to call you. So those conversations were quite neat. And I mean, SUFCOM was a small organization, but I really enjoyed the amount of engineer family that was there. That didn't necessarily know who I was or whose daughter I was, but eventually found out that I was Warrant Officer Alkenbrack's daughter. And some of the conversations I had after that were quite interesting. So
I bet. Good.
Yeah, I ran into, at the time, it was Colonel Noonan.
Yeah, Steve Noonan would have been there. Mark Meisner, I think, was there, running the engineer cell.
Yeah, Tom, trying to think. There's so many names spooling around. But I remember Colonel Noonan stopped me. One of my favorite things was the rule of holding a clipboard. So always hold a clipboard so that you look busy.
Yeah.
Because it's very protective in nature, especially when you're a lone corporal running around a headquarters. And Colonel Noonan stopped me in the hallway one day. And I said, sir. And all he said to me was, you make me feel old. And then he just walked away, and I was kind of just left stunned. I guess he didn't want anything from me. Just carried on my way, but it was quite cute. He was like, you make me feel old. Okay. Bye, sir. Thanks.
How is life as a commissioned officer different from your time in the ranks?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think my time in the ranks has made me a more connected officer to my troops at all times. It's a lot more responsibility. It's a lot more paperwork. It's a lot more admin. There's more meetings. But I love the switch. We had a conversation before we started where, sometimes you just have to step up and take charge, and in a vacuum, you just end up leading. And I like it. I like being able to take that vacuum and fill it with good leadership and good direction and good camaraderie with your humans that serve with you.
How did you find was there a change of pace in terms of the roles you were filling as an officer?
there's probably more.
Right.
So I was a little bit of a rock star as an NCM, and I think that it just continued as an officer. They saw someone capable and able and just kept like to pile it on. You know, the reward for good work in the CAF is more work. Mm-hmm. I identify with that very much. So I did a lot of good work, and therefore I ended up getting a lot of good work.
It's one of the things that I think as the latter part of my career, when I saw people sort of like you who had that quality and characteristic of performance, but also probably not a natural governor on the engine to do that. I would often, if someone was getting posted out of an organization, sort of say, this person's awesome, but sometimes you might have to save them from themselves.
I really wish someone had wrote that in a posting letter for me anywhere, because I think someone should have stepped in and said, "You're doing too much." You know, I was NPF, OPI. I was entertainment committee chair. I was in charge of a lot of things, and I think that could have been spread around a little bit. Just because I'm competent and I can get it done, doesn't mean that I should be doing all the stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a self-assessment, so it's bias. You know, I feel like, woe me, Cinderella, doing all the things. But I did a lot. I was expected to do a lot. And I will say I accelerated in front of my peers or at the top of my peers, and that's wonderful. But I look back and say, could I have ended up in the same place by being less busy?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer.
Yeah, it's really, I think, an important thing that leaders not just hit the easy button for those people who can always get it done. I mean, you probably remember this from elements of basic training where the same person, on a section task or platoon task, say, okay, well, now you need to pick your 2IC. It's like, but you can't pick the following people because they're always getting picked as 2ICs because they always get stuff done, right? So there's that sort of deliberate limitation that's put on people in that sort of basic training scenario, but I think it needs to extend when you've got, it's not that you need to protect people all the time, but certainly you need to spread the work around. And sure, if you've got those folks who can really deliver on things, great. Well, then give them the really important things that you want a certain standard on. But the other stuff, it's okay that you don't hit 90% on it. Like 60%, that's okay. So guess what? That person gets the experience. It's less work than piling it on somebody else. And you're still going to get something that's fine. Because not everything has to be an A+.
Yeah. I'm looking at you like, what?
You say that like, it doesn't have to be an A+.
Doesn't have to be an A+.
Doesn't have to be an A+.
It's gonna be an A+.
Well,
yeah. This is how I'm taking time to transition, is just reminding myself that it's okay not to be busy all the time.
Right.
Productivity doesn't relate to your worth. And I can spout this to my team currently all the time. It's okay to not be productive. If you're not producing anything, it doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't reflect on your self-worth or your worth at work. Sometimes you just need to read into something. Like, not producing doesn't mean you're not working.
Right. Every minute of every day doesn't have to be generating something that you can point to and say, there. Mm-hmm.
And I've taken it on where I have some great performers at work that I rescued one of them to fill a void, and he's been able to spool down in the position. And I find that very valuable. It's just rescuing and reminding people that it doesn't have to be like that all the time. You don't have to volunteer, which was part of my problem. I volunteer for a lot of things.
Right.
In a vacuum.
Yeah. Leadership's active.
Yeah. I was like, so no one's going to do this? And I would just be like, send it this way. Let's add one on top of that. But I will say I did a ton of awesome things. So Ironman 2013, Ozons 2014. I was the OPI for the 100th anniversary celebrations at Two Field M. I'm also helping them with their 110th anniversary right now.
How are you?
Because why not? And then, I just family. I loved family days. I loved fundraising for the MPF. I loved all that stuff, but someone else could have done it, and when I look back, I wish I had had more training for some of the things I had done. As an LT, postage field, I was the adjutant. I came in as the adj. In a maneuver arms unit, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Because the adjutant's supposed to be your senior captain, ready to be promoted, being able to, contribute to the deportment and discipline of the junior officers. As an LT, you can't do that. It's very stressful to work with some of the files that an adjutant sees with low experience. And because I had experience in an orderly room, there was a lot of assumption made at what level that could be. I was a support services manager at a clinic as an LT, which is normally a captain position. I was an OC of a company as a captain. Mm-hmm. Awesome experience to have ambulance company, a kind of new company, and be in charge, and that was wonderful. But it was above my ability, and I pushed hard to make it happen. I was an OPSO without ATOC or AOC in a brigade. And to sit around the table and keep up with my maneuver arms comrades who had mentorship and, education, and they were all ATOC and AOC qualified or more. And here I am, this Air Force female health services OPSO, really trying to fake it, trying to scramble to read everything, to be the best and not have the education or the training or the mentorship behind me that I needed. That was hard. It was awesome, but it was hard.
And so what were the impacts of that on your health and your wellness, of that sort of pace? And
I think burnout is real. And I took a posting back to Canadian Forces Health Services Group headquarters in 2016. And I think my CO, I had been asked to be sent back to the headquarters in Ottawa. And I think my CO, Gary O'Neill, at the time, he knew I needed a break. I was going to be the staff officer for the chief of staff. So I don't know if that was a break necessarily,
right,
but it was just a different pace. But sometimes, remember early in my start as a staff officer, I said, taking care of 200 plus humans at a brigade level is easier than chasing one colonel. And I kind of giggled over that, right? I was like, I'm going to need to put an Apple ID tag on this human or something, because it is hard to keep track of one person. And I will say I had some pretty wonderful chiefs of staff at health services. So Colonel Uyghur was my first chief of staff, and then Giselle Fontaine, who's now retired, and Colonel Ferris. So it was good. We had a great time. I learned a lot from these humans.
And when did Invictus Games come into your life?
So along that theme of burnout, there was a period of really high stress in the headquarters, kind of just after COVID had started. So I would say end of August 2020. And the CAF had already been inside long-term care facilities providing assistance. And we had a motion to produce papers. And that is, the federal government asking the military for some information. And it dealt with our presence in the long-term care facilities from health services. And I was put in charge of gathering all these documents. And there were a lot of documents. And they included daily sit reps from each of the long-term care facilities. And it was hard to read some of the stuff. And I gathered it. I think I had about 2 weeks, 10 days. And I remember reading pages and pages and pages and taking the work home. So taking my laptop home and just keep going. I think I worked for about 10 days straight, just reading, and submitted it. It was all good to go. And then about a week later, the right side of my body started to not work. And I was curious because I was still running, and I thought that I had maybe pulled a nerve, or you can't pull a nerve, but like twinged a nerve or pulled a muscle at my back.
Pinched
something. I was like, this is not weird. My right side felt very clumsy. And I had lost a shoe twice at work. So picture 3Bs, so skirt, shirt, high heel. I had just blown a shoe twice at Carlin campus. And then the one incident that scared me was I was going up the stairs at Carlin campus and I tripped going upstairs. And I fell forward and I looked back and it looked like my foot hadn't lifted. And I thought, well, that's weird. Like I told my foot to lift. And then the one thing that confirmed that this was not normal, I was doing Girl Guides one evening and we were all outside because it was COVID restrictions. So we have masks and we're playing outside.
Yeah.
And we're reading a story. And in the story, the girls have to do actions to the words. And one of the actions is hopping on your left foot and then hopping on your right foot. So they called, starboard and we hopped on our left foot, and they called port. We were supposed to hop on our right foot. And I was an adult standing in a group of children looking at my leg, unable to hop on my right foot. I knew what I was supposed to be doing, but I wasn't doing it. So the next day I called a friend who's a physiotherapist. She said, Alaina, those are all stroke symptoms. You need to go get help. And I did not believe her. I believed her. But I said, no, I'm too busy. Too busy. Like I have stuff going on. It was a Sunday. I'll never forget it. So I have people coming for dinner.
Right.
Ugh. And Lindsay lives in Petawawa. And we've been dear friends for a long time. And I hung up the phone and I went to go take a shower. And my husband came into the bathroom and he said, Lindsay called me 4 times. If you don't go to the hospital, Lindsay's driving here from Petawawa to take you to the hospital. So I decided to go to the emergency room and I checked in, and from working in a hospital as a healthcare administration officer, I was screened through triage and provided with a bracelet that didn't look like everyone else's. That was my first worry. So I sat in the emergency room and then I was called up in 10 minutes.
Also not
cool.
Not normal.
Yeah. So I went to the back, and at Queensborough Carleton is actually a very circular emergency ward. And so I asked them to leave the door open so I could see what was happening because I'm curious. And I could see the doctor visiting each room and kind of making his way to my room. And with him was kind of a court reporter. So it was admin staff typing the encounter on a computer because it was the height of COVID, right?
Right.
So they wanted the doctor not to be typing on a computer, but to be engaging with patients. And so he stepped into where I was and he listened to my concerns. He did some poking and prodding and he kind of rolled his chair back. And he said, well, surprise, it could be COVID. So we're going to test you for COVID. Yeah. Sure. And then he said, but I'm positive I know what you have. And I was like, what do I have? And he said, you're the right age, you're the right color, and you're the right sex. He said, I think you have multiple sclerosis. And immediately I was like, absolutely not. Like, there's no way.
Right.
I told him I got bit by a tick the year before camping.
Right.
And I said, it's Lyme. Like, I'm sure I have Lyme. And he looked at the reporter and he said, could you test her for Lyme too? So immediately, this was the fastest clinical encounter I've ever had in an emergency room, was at the height of COVID. I was in and out of that emergency room in 3 hours with a CT scan, a urinalysis, and blood work on the go. And the results of the CT scan that I was given that day, I remember Dr. Graves kind of pulled me out of the waiting room and showed me the CT scan, and it had lit up like a Christmas tree. And he's a former Army guy. I think he's ex-artillery.
Oh, okay.
And he said to me, he said, Alaina, this is not like a mountain or a complete roadblock, but he says, certainly it's a bump in the road. He said, we're going to need to know more about this. And he said, so I'll put in all the referrals to neurology. And that was kind of the end of the encounter. Mm-hmm. So what do you do with that?
So what's the significance when you say the CT scan lit up like a Christmas tree to MS? So with the CT scan having bright spots all over it, so it just had bright lights all through my brain, they sent me for a pretty immediate MRI. And on that MRI, they saw about a dozen lesions in my brain that they weren't clear about what the lesions meant at that moment, because one of the lesions was quite large. It measured in centimeters. So when I read the MRI report, I cried. Because if you think about how small your brain is
really.
Especially mine.
Yeah, like, ooh. But it's not a huge organ.
Right.
Right? It's inside your skull, and it's not that big, but to have something in there that measures in centimeters freaked me out.
Right.
And so I memorized and read where every single lesion was in my brain. I was prepared. I saw one neurologist, and she basically said, I'm not sure what this is. And when you have a discussion with a highly qualified doctor in neurology who said, I'm not really sure what this is. There are a bunch of conditions that are kind of have the same, like your brain could look the same way. ADEMS and a bunch of other. I was Googling everything, which you shouldn't Google. So she said, I want you to be referred to the MS clinic in Ottawa. And I did not know we had a multiple sclerosis clinic here that is top Canadian MS clinic. So I was referred there for intake, and I want everyone to know that I had no idea what was going on at this point. Mm-hmm. Like no one had actually told me anything. And at my intake appointment at the MS clinic, I actually lowered my mask and I looked at the fellow, at one of the neurology doctor fellows, and I said to him, do I have multiple sclerosis? And he lowered his mask and said, oh, yeah.
Just like that.
Just like that. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh, you're alone. Like,
right.
It was COVID. I didn't have a husband. I didn't have a friend and everything. Oh, yeah, you have MS. So MS is a diagnosis of exclusion. So that means they test you for everything. And if you don't have everything,
oh, really?
You have MS. So there is a criteria that they test you on. So you need to meet 3 pieces of this criteria to be considered to have multiple sclerosis. So you need to have a flare, an active flare, which is this presenting as hemiparesis. So the right side of my body was kind of frozen.
Okay.
So that was a check mark. You've had a flare. The second thing is lesions that they can see that are bright or active on your MRI. Check mark, have that. And then the third thing is a lumbar puncture. And in the lumbar puncture, they look for these horizontal lines of a certain protein. And I would tell you what the protein's called, but I always say it wrong. And so on December 4th, I had a lumbar puncture, December 4th, 2020. And that was terrible. I don't recommend. Because again, you're all by yourself.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah. Really, like it was, I don't recommend. That's it. I don't recommend. But it all came back that it was positive for MS. And I started on disease modifying therapy right away. And disease modifying therapy is just meant to keep your body from producing lesions, or really MS is all about, it's an autoimmune condition. So your body eats away at the protective coating on your nerves in your brain, causing these scars.
Okay.
It's called the myelin sheath, such a piece of fatty tissue that helps conduct signals in your nerves. And so my body decided to eat away at that and produce these little scars inside your brain that can be picked up. And it took me a long time to even wrestle with that. So Invictus Games fell into my lap kind of after my MS diagnosis. I started to want to learn. I wanted to know who else has MS because I didn't know anybody. So I used Google again. And I literally, I think the search criteria were MS plus calf plus woman. And boom, I hit enter. And I tell you, Stacy Traze Musso came up. And I said, I don't know who this woman is, but I need to know her. And it was her Invictus Games profile.
Oh.
And I said, huh. So I did the cool thing that we all do in the Army because of 6 degrees of separation or 0. I Googled Facebook. Like I went into my Facebook and saw who was friends with her that I could reach out to. And I just sent her a message. And I met her over FaceTime because it was COVID. And it changed everything.
Had you heard of Invictus before that?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. And as soon as I met Stacy, I just felt better. Like I heard her story. She was diagnosed in a special duty area overseas in Afghanistan. And I was diagnosed here. Like it just changed everything. I think one of the biggest things with MS is that you have a fear of, is this going to be the end of me? Like, is like cancer or
Right.
like, is this terminal? Or I thought that I was just going to get worse and worse and worse. I don't have that type of MS at the moment. So she assured me that it's possible to live well. And that's really what I wanted to hear. And seeing her be an athlete was another inkling of like, ooh, you're living really well. And so I wanted to know more about Invictus and how it was helping her on her healing journey. So I met another amazing human, Levi Bradley, who lives in Ottawa. Again, an MS warrior and former CAF member. And they really helped me a lot with the questions that I had. And then both these lovelies encouraged me to apply for Invictus 23. So Levi was involved in 2020, which turned into 2022 in the Netherlands.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
And I believe Stacey's 2017 Toronto.
So why don't you give the listener a bit of an overview of what Invictus Games is?
So Invictus Games is a wonderful program. It was developed by Prince Harry in around, he got the idea around 2012 when he visited Warrior Games in the States. And he saw a need for soldiers and former soldiers to have a space to heal. And he really focused on that healing power of sport and camaraderie. And so his experience at Warrior Games was so positive that he wanted to bring it back to the UK and start something. And what he started was Invictus Games. And it's grown a lot since 2014. They've done Invictus in London and Toronto, in Dusseldorf last year, the Netherlands, Australia, the US. Like, it's about every 2 years, give or take. And it gathers in soldiers and veterans from up to 22 nations now. And we gather in a place where we can heal together through sport. There's a lot of power in being part of a team again, and being part of a team that does some wonderful stuff, that heals some people, where you get to share your journey, where you're all on the same level. And it really lets you know that even if you've lost confidence in your body, there's still things that you can do and things that you can contribute. And it's pretty cool. The sports, you're encouraged, you must pick one adaptive sport. And the adaptive sports that I could choose from were wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, and seated volleyball. So I have issues with my neck, so I chose seated volleyball for good reason, because wheelchair rugby is actually called murder ball, and it's rough. And wheelchair basketball, which I played, it's rough too. Mm-hmm. Like it's a lot. And I find that I'm always about a foot short of the basket, so I can shoot, but I don't know, just being in a chair, you lose the momentum. So wheelchair or seated volleyball was my jam, and I really love that. And then there's a ton of athletic sports. So there's everything from cycling, archery, discus, shot put, running, rowing. Ooh, who am I missing?
Swimming.
There's swimming. Oh my gosh, the swimming. And all of those combined. So you can pick, they encourage you to choose 3 sports, which is difficult for some competitors because depending on your abilities. And then there's no top. Like we had a guy who was registered for 7, I think, on our team.
Wow.
Yeah, like just go. So I'm not that kind of girl. I stuck to 3. I would have preferred 2, but it was great. I did discus and cycling. So it's pretty magical. I was also able to be co-captain of Invictus Games 2023 with my co-captain, Bernard Casey, former INT officer. And Bernard and I had a great time. I will say I'm completely biased, but 2023 Team Canada was the best. So, and I am very biased. We were this really unique group of humans, like 31 of us. And it was a great cross-section of the CAF, a great cross-section of healing, injuries, experiences, families, abilities. And we really had a huge opportunity to come together and help each other. And even now, if you looked at my phone, my WhatsApp group for athletes chat it would still be going. And our experience in Germany last September was outstanding. We are very excited that Invictus Games 25 is coming back to Canada. And so it's the first time that winter sports will ever be explored for Invictus Games. And if you follow Invictus Games on Facebook or any other social media platform, right now they are in Whistler.
Yeah, I
and
saw
they're
that.
having their camp. And it just fills my heart with joy to know this is back in Canada, and to know that, next February, there will be competitors on the slopes of Whistler, enjoying and growing and learning and healing and sharing. And really our country is worthy, right? And we want others to benefit from this experience. I honestly wish that every human who was releasing from the calf, who needed help transitioning, could have this experience. It's pretty big. I know that all of us on the team want to do it again. It's a gift. But right now, for the most part, Invictus is a one and done experience in the calf, just because it looks like an average. Again, this year they had more than 500 applications. So it looks like there's about an average around 550 to 600 applications received by the board to make decisions about competitors. And for anyone who applied and didn't get selected for Invictus this year, just know that there is a time, and your time will come. It needs to be the right time for you, and it needs to be the right pick and the right sports and that kind of thing. So it's not that the board doesn't think you're worthy. It could be not the right time for you.
Well, Dusseldorf was certainly the right time and the right fit for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was certainly the right time. I have a very supportive chain of command. I was able to train for a lot of the summer. I will say this is a huge shout out to OBC, the Ottawa Bike Club. They were huge supporters of my success, because one of my sports that I chose was cycling. And at the beginning of the season, I was terrified to cycle. I had a really large training accident in 2005, just before I came to Selfcom. I broke both my arms and injured my neck on a mountain bike while training at PT. So it was PT on a Wednesday afternoon, which we call stables.
Right.
In the olden days, they would be cleaning out stables. But this was training for an event called the Cross Base Challenge in Petawawa.
Yeah, I know the cross base.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I was training for it. It was May 11th, 2005. And we went from One Canadian Field Hospital, Headshed, through the four-way stop, headed up to the top of Jubilee Lodge. So like the golf course, anyways. We all rallied there and kind of talked about it. And we then went down the big hill. It's a big hill.
It's a big hill.
It's a big hill, whether you're going up or down it. Mm-hmm. And I got to midsection in the hill.
And it's not straight.
It's not straight. It curves to the right. And it has levels. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that hill. So someone stopped really quickly in front of me. So moving a pack of bikes down this hill, someone stopped really fast in front of me, and I swerved right. And someone else was stopped there. I think they were trying to find the biathlon trails, which is what we were going to turn on to. And then I had to stop hard again because someone again was stopped in front of me. And when I stopped hard, I was going quite fast. Bad body position, so forward on the mountain bike, and my bike flipped and threw me. So I landed on my left clavicle, so like end of my shoulder, broke the end off, and then I tumbled. So luckily I turned my face to the right, cracked open my helmet, slammed my arm on the ground, which broke my radial head, fractured my radial head, teacup, and I just tumbled. And I remember waking up and my feet were facing the top of the hill, and I was surrounded, thank the Lord, by all these medics because I worked at Field Hospital.
Some of them might not know bike protocol, but they know medicine.
Oh my gosh. So I just remember looking up, and this guy Reed was there, and I was just thankful. I didn't remember his name at the time, and I couldn't tell them what I was doing, and I didn't know what day it was.
Right.
I was quite confused because it was an afternoon, and PT we don't normally do in the afternoon, but I knew everybody around me, and so they certainly my warrant officer, warrant to go, rushed to the top of the hill because at the top of the hill is what?
Hospital.
The BMC. Yeah, the base medical clinic. So they wouldn't take me because it was 2 p.m. and diagnostic imaging is like closed. So they called the ambulance and an ambulance came and got me and took me to Pembroke General Hospital, where I was diagnosed with a left clavicle fracture and sent home. The next day, as a true typical soldier, I woke up, Brian got me dressed, put a ponytail in my hair, and I went to sick parade. Because you know that if you've been at the hospital, you got to go to sick parade the next day. And at sick parade, I remember telling the doctor that I dropped a plate that morning with my right hand. And I told him it felt like electricity, like I had been zapped. And he was, oh. So he sent me for another X-ray on my elbow. And I remember, it's open curtains kind of where the treatment bays are. And I remember 2 teams of doctors coming in and they said, do you want the bad news or the bad news? And I was like, well, lay it on me.
Oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah, he's like, well, you broke both your arms. Okay, cool. So that's how my summer of 2005 started.
And hence why you were probably apprehensive about
Terrified.
cycling.
But I figured that the best place I could be in to start riding my bike again was Invictus. I didn't have to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to show up. So I remember my first time trial with OBC. I panicked so hard. I wanted to pull over the bike and stop. Like I just panicked. The whole first part of the race season through the spring, midsummer, I think I was just there to stop feeling so much anxiety about being on a bike. And as soon as that dissipated, magic. Like it was just magical. I love the bike. I got good. I got really fast. I didn't beat anyone that summer. So the whole summer, I came in last every single time trial. Solid last. But I was making improvement.
Right.
And I was making huge improvement for me. And being a cyclist and having MS and dealing with the heat, because MS makes you heat sensitive and it plays with your energy, fatigue and that kind of thing. I did great. I fought against me and really, really worked hard. So I think by the end of that summer, I remember my coach, Mike Fuentespina, he looked at me and he said, you can no longer consider yourself a recreational cyclist. And I thought that was the best thing to hear ever. And he was able actually to come with us to Dusseldorf. And at Dusseldorf, I competed in the IRB2 category, which accounts for my MS diagnosis. And I met 2 amazing girls that I raced against, Katrina Brown and Danielle Pothoff. So Katrina is from the UK and Danielle she's American. And we raced hard. We had super fun. And both times I finished the races, I had no idea how I finished. And it was my competitors who told me how I finished. So the first time was a time trial. So I ran my time trial, and because I was the first one to take off for the time trial, I did my loop.
Benchmark.
I did my loop. I don't have any benchmark. There's no TVs in the pit row where they push you into. And my little garage that I put my bike in was next to the UK garage. So I put my bike away, which was actually my coach's bike because it was awesome. And took my helmet off and I got an apple and took my shoes off, put on my flip-flappies and headed outside of the garage to see Katrina celebrating with her husband, Charlie. And I joined in. I was like, yay, what are we celebrating? This is so exciting. I'm so excited for you. And so I gave Katrina a big squeeze and I was so excited. And I said, how did you do, love? Like, what's going on? And she's like, I got silver. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. It's so exciting. And she just pushed me back and looked at me and said, Alaina, you got gold. And the tears, like the ugly crying at that point would have been just over the moon. I had no idea. And because there was only 3 of us in the competition for the IRB2 category, they only give out 2 medals. So I had already accepted that maybe I wasn't going to get a medal. And then I got gold, which is super fun. So Katrina and I were able to accept our medals together, which was awesome because I think Katrina's amazing. And then about 5 hours later, they ran the criterium.
Okay.
which is a timed race. So you race until about 20 minutes and then you know it's your last lap. So they'll tell you by going through the start line, they hold up a giant one and they ring a cow, like a cowbell.
Right.
And I didn't know that they were going to combine boys and girls on this race. And racing with men is very different from racing with women because they're much faster than we are. And because I had trained racing with men all summer, I didn't have any issues at all. My coach, Mike, said the best thing to me. He said, Alaina, you need to be the first woman through that first corner. He said, the race is yours after that. And I was like, okay. So when we lined up, all I could think of was just be the first one to get through that corner. And there was an opening and I took it. And you're not really allowed to knock people off of their apex. Like there's some cycling rules. You have to be nice. And as soon as I moved through the corner, I pulled way to the right so the boys could just zoom past me. And I stuck with this guy, a German, who was in front of me, who I got very angry with because he slowed down in the corners. So I yelled at him a little, I'm very sorry. And then we came up. I couldn't figure out why he kept slowing down for the corners. But he was going the same, like we would race the straights and then he would slow in the corners. So finally I passed him because the third corner is a blind 90. So very hard depth perception wise. It's a hard corner to get without slowing down. And so I knew he was going to make me mess up that corner. So I pushed to get in front of him and I took the corner and we whizzed through. And then we just continued racing like that. Race on the straightaway, I would take the corner. Race on the straightaway, I would take the corner. And it was fun. It was fun. Like I was killing it. He was killing it. He is like a fridge. Like this guy was a big guy. And about halfway through, he kind of yelled at me and said, how much longer? I said, 10 minutes. It's good. And he let me draft him at one point. So I kind of went behind him. And for any of the humans who like cycling, drafting behind a very large human is amazing.
Handy.
So good. It was so nice of him to let me do that. So then I zoomed out in front, took the rest of the corners. We crossed the finish line together, had a big hug at the end of the race. And I realized he has a glass eye. So it would have been very hard for him to manage the depth perception through the corners.
Of course.
So it was very much, it was good for both of us to have the company. And, you know, he motivated me to be faster. I motivated him in the corners, I'm sure. And so we had a big hug at the end of the race. And then he came and gave me the German team coin, which was very nice. And then again, I had no clue what was happening because I was just having fun. And I put my bike away in the garage and I got out my sweater and put my flip-flops on and I walked outside the garage and the coach for the UK team was there and he gave me a big hug. And I was like, oh, great, Ryan, thanks. Like, thanks. Not knowing. And he said, Alaina, I'm so glad that you didn't let the Yank win. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, you won gold. And again, I was just stunned, just cried a lot. It was really good.
You'd mentioned to me before about something the Girl Guides had given you for Invictus.
They did.
Because you're a Girl Guide leader.
I am a Girl Guide leader. So I was able to pick my Girl Guide name this year. It's Guider Invictus. Very fitting. My Girl Guides gave me an envelope and I was not allowed to open it until I arrived in Germany. And I'm at the hotel with my roommate, Jess, and we opened this envelope together and it's a banner. And all my girls had signed this banner. And I hung it on our wall in our hotel room. And it says, go, Tammy, go. So Tammy is like a kind of a nickname that I have. My parents called me Tammy when I was younger. And my Girl Guides called me Guider Tammy before I was named Guider Invictus. And so just saying that, like, go, Tammy, go on my wall every morning when I woke up, pretty magical.
When did you get into the Girl Guide program?
1987. It's really good. So Girl Guides has been my anchor my entire life. So we moved around a lot, but I always knew that at the next base, there would be a Girl Guide group. And I would fit in, like, same rank, same level, same patrol responsibilities. Right. I would fit in. And my whole life, no matter what, the first thing I do when I move somewhere is look for a Girl Guide group that I could help out with. So I would go to the commissioner of the area and say like, where do you need the most help? So I've had the privilege of helping out with the littles, the sparks, 5 and 6 year olds who I thought were too cute. And I needed to leave them because I would I wanted to take one home.
They're the gold dust for selling cookies too.
Oh my God, they're so cute.
Yeah, they're
It's little pink shirts. And now we have embers, which are 7, 8, 9 kind of. And then Girl Guides and Pathfinders and then Rangers. And when I arrived here in Ottawa, I actually asked one of the area support girls who I knew before, where do you need the most help? And she said, Community 40. And it happened to be the community I was living in. And I had a choice between guiding in Barrhaven or guiding in a little place called North Gore. And North Gore is a slice of heaven in southern Ottawa. It is absolutely wonderful. We have about 40 girls and about 10 leaders, and it's our little utopia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's our little utopia. And this year I have the privilege of the largest Pathfinder/Ranger group I've ever led in my entire life. I have 14 girls. That means 14 teenagers from the local area. And I like them because I'm not a parent, nor am I their friend. I'm Guider Invictus. And the things I get to hear and the things I get to do with them are pretty unique. And I love their curiosity, and I love it because it keeps me young. It keeps me in tune with what music is cool, what words are cool. And these girls are so much fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I see them every Tuesday. And I get to see them become adults and young women. This Tuesday, we were at a retirement home last night in Manotick, and I saw one of my girls really take heed my advice. I said, you're here to listen, and you're here to ask questions, and you're here to brighten someone's day. And she just took it on, sat with these elderly residents and asked questions and smiled. And I was like, girl, I'm so proud of you. And then the week before that, we were testing them at swimming. And one of my former Girl Guides came back as our lifeguard.
Nice.
So it gives me a lot of joy to hang out with those girls. And some of my first Pathfinders are married and they have babies.
Oh, wow.
Have their businesses. And I'm telling you, every time I see these girls, I get shocked. Like, I taught you how to make, craft dinner, or like, I'm glad to be a part of their journey.
Round knit.
Yeah, round knit. I know. Yeah. Strangle it, stab it, scoop out its guts, throw it off a cliff. Like, just skills and discussions that we have as Girl Guide leaders are just different from what parents or what peers have with their kids. The guiding program has changed a lot, and I think it's so valuable to have a space to know that in that space you are accepted 110%. And that's what I needed to know when I was growing up, was that I had a place. And it was Tuesday nights. It was my place.
I mean, one of the things we have a lot of things in common, as we found out from our first discussion, whether it be friends or places we live, but we're also sort of both kind of transitioning out of the military at similar times. And I'm just curious about sort of your insights and experience of coming of that transition. Mm-hmm.
Transition is one of the most difficult activities I've done in the CAF so far. I thought it was going to be easy. Mm-hmm. I thought you'd be able just to like a slice of bread, you just slice off the end and keep on going. That is not how it is. And I think that we need to really realize that shifting gears and transitioning out of the CAF is not as easy as it looks, and it needs deliberate effort. And I was posted to Transition Center in 2001 or 2021. And I've come to know that there are some big things that chains of command can do to make that transition easy or hard for a member. And one of the biggest things that I have to pass on to leaders or junior leaders or anyone in the CAF is this theory about grace and how you can employ grace in the way you lead. And I spoke with Matt Boniface, Chief Officer Boniface at the Transition Center. This is one of the first conversations I had with him. And I said, when I first got sick, about a month after my diagnosis, I had terrible nerve pain from, we don't know from where. It was probably related to me digesting a diagnosis. And my boss at the time Kirsten McIsaac, gave me a ton of grace. So I think I called in sick for a week, and she knew. She knew it just sucked. And after a certain amount of time, which she allowed me to have, then it was like conversations about, okay, cool. Like, when can we pick you back up? Do you want to try and come in like remotely? Do you want to, are you checking with your clinician, that kind of thing? So there was a ton of follow-up given, but also a ton of grace. So she knew I wasn't doing well, but she checked in constantly. And I said, it's grace to know. I had this done a couple of times when I was in NCM. I got pulled into the RSM's office and I thought I was getting in trouble. Really thought I was getting in trouble. And instead he slid me a leave pass across the table and told me I did a good job and not to come into work tomorrow. I was like, great. But when someone has something going on and you could spare them for the day, slipping them a short leave pass and saying, go be at home, that's grace. And the Army put some restrictions on it, right? Restrictions on short leave and that kind of thing. But sometimes you just need, that your soldiers need a day, or maybe they need a few hours, or, maybe they need the 5-minute phone call pump up. Maybe they need a reminder. Maybe they need someone to do anything for them. You name it, right? Like shovel their wife's driveway. Make sure that something gets fixed at home, bring over the guys and do something that needs to get done that's impacting the family. These are all forms of grace. And when I was a kid, I remember my dad telling stories about grace being very popular, the work party that showed up to fix something.
Yeah.
And I think that we've slid away from that. And I think that there aren't rules about grace or about how you can employ it. So as long as you can employ it so that you give the same level of grace to everyone, that it's not just given to one person because you like or dislike them, but it's given out on a basis of need. I think that that's something that I feel privileged. And I've always questioned whether it's because I'm a major or, would I be treated the same way if I was still private Alkenbrack? So I always consider that, especially linked to transition, where people are not doing good. It might take them time. I'm 3 years into my transition phase and I still feel like I'm holding on for dear life. And, only now am I comfortable with the idea that I get to leave the CAF. Not I have to leave, I get to leave. I'm finished with my CAF service and that's okay. 22 years of your life is okay. It will be culturally different on the other side. And I've noticed some big things about the culture and how to apply or not to apply my CAF experience in that culture. But it's going to be different, but it's not impossible. It just takes some grace with you and with everybody else, right? With my family and with the new people that I work with and the opportunities in my future. So I think that's a big thing to talk about.
Alaina, this has been a lot of fun today, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to come by the house and have a chat. Last question, if you have any recommendations to the listener in terms of educate, inspire, or elevate.
I'm so glad you asked me. I love being here. Before we started the podcast, I said, I'm excited to do this because I know the answers to all the questions. So I will be truthful and say this was the only question I needed to write stuff down for, because I read books and don't remember them. I don't remember authors often. I just like books for the way they are. But I will tell you, there's one series that I blew through. If you know the television series that's new right now, it's called The Silo.
Yes.
Okay. So I read...
On Apple?
Yeah. I read the books before The Silo. My husband put The Silo on and it seemed familiar. And then all of a sudden I said, I've read these books, and I have read the books. So Hugh Howley is one of my favorite authors. He writes short stories that kind of form these books. And with the Silo series, there are actually 3 books. The first one is Wool, and then it's Dust, and then it's Shift. And that's a trilogy that is the Silo. And I'm telling you, the way he writes these books is absolutely amazing. I ate them like they were my favorite dessert, just ate through them. And because it's a short story format, it's quite easy to do that. He also wrote a story called Beacon 23, which is about a beacon on the edge of space, a manned beacon. So there's a human inside this beacon. And then he wrote one called The Shell Collector. Now, my favorite style of book is dystopian tales. I'm obsessed. So if Hunger Games, all those books, definitely. But Hugh Halley is an American author, and he writes these fabulous books. And I'm saving one for an upcoming cruise called Zombie, and I'll read it while I'm on the cruise. The other book I'm currently reading is called Honeybee Democracy. So I am new into being a beekeeper. They started last May, and anything I can get my hands on to help me raise these honeybees is helpful. And this author, Thomas Seeley, he talks about the collective hive, the hive mind, basically, and how decisions are made within a honeybee hive. And beekeepers always thought that it was about queen bees and what pheromones they put out, but it's not necessarily that. And so he gets real scientific about it. So if you like the scientific method as well as beekeeping, that's kind of neat. And the third book I'm reading right now is called The Midlife Cyclist. And I have it right here on the table. It's by Phil Cavell. And it's specifically about the 40 plus cyclist. And it's about knowing that you're not necessarily going to be slow in your old age. So a lot of the riders that I train with I'm very young compared to them. So I get my butt kicked by 60 and 70-year-old riders who've been riding their whole life, and they come out for time trial every week and they kick my butt because they have trained their whole lives. And I want to be one of those 70-year-old cyclists that grabs their amazing bike out of the garage and just kicks butt on a Tuesday and Thursday night, right? So I'm trying to be inspired to be a better rider.
Thanks for those recommendations, and thanks again for being one of our Northern Sentinels.
Thank you.
You can find information in the show notes on Multiple Sclerosis Canada, the Invictus Games in Dusseldorf, and the upcoming Invictus Games in Whistler. Thanks for listening, and goodbye until next time.